Welcome to Sales and Marketing Talk Show. Today we are talking about product-led growth, and I have Bill Macaitis here with me. Bill is a growth advisor, and previously he's been working, for example, with Salesforce, Zendesk, and Slack. And great to have you on the show, Bill.
Yeah,
welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. And we could actually start things off by defining what product-led growth is. I think it's something that everyone working in marketing and sales in SaaS companies are like super excited about. But I think people have like different ways of explaining that one. And I would love to hear like your pitch about what product-led growth is to you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question, and everybody does have a slightly different opinion on it. For me, my background, so I spent 10 years on the B2C side of the house before I came to B2B. And when I came to B2B, I was a little shocked, to be honest with you, because I saw some really innovative products, software products, but I saw a really dated go-to-market model. I saw a dated go-to-market model that was centered around sending out press releases, holding field events, top-down selling via outbound AEs, buying steak dinners to the CIO. And that was the model, right? And one of the things I had seen is like in B2C, I'm like, well, there's a lot more innovative ways to generate demand and leverage SEO and content marketing and virality and all these different things. And, so you start seeing this inbound movement from marketing, like driving a lot of that interest. And then you started to see this idea around product-led growth. And the easiest way that I think about it is product-led growth isn't saying, some people will say, hey, it's all about your product management team, and they're the one that deliver growth. Like the way I actually think about it is just that, hey, people spend the majority of their time in your product. And the more effectively and efficiently you can infuse your marketing into the product, your sales into the product, your support into the product, even your success into the product, you're going to grow faster. And so, a lot of things that come from that, right? Like pricing and packaging. So you see a lot of freemium models where people just get into the product, right? And they're going to experience value. You're going to see sales where they can buy high velocity, they can upgrade. You're going to see success where they can do proactive live chat in the product. So for me, like that's what I kind of think it means. I really think it's a unifier for all the teams that have to work together. And you kind of have to re-examine some of the reporting structures that go along with that, the incentives, the metrics, so that these teams can work together with development to make sure that they can have that product-led growth juice to accelerate their company.
Yeah, and I think it's like super, super interesting. And if I think me as a like sales guy, even though I'm not selling a SaaS product, but I still think as a SaaS salesperson, it would be like way better to give the client the product, show it, let them use it, rather than like only tell that, hey, this is something that our product does. And still, like not that many years back, the way to do it was that salespeople were just like telling that, hey, this is what you can do with our product. And now I think it's super, super nice to see the like movement to the product growth side.
I've done sales. I've run sales before. Trust me, I think any salesperson would rather have a lead that comes to them that already knows, hey, this is what your company does. Oh yeah, I've been playing with the software. I love it. Like, where do we sign? Maybe not that exaggerated, but versus I've never heard of you guys. Like, what do you do? Right? Like, oh, really? Like, I've never even, like that's a lot of one-to-one knife fighting and a lot of nurturing and development you have to do. Versus, I think if you can get people to just start using the product, they're much more likely going to experience value before they are forced to decide if they're going to buy from you, and that's just a much better value equation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really about like delivering the value before the paywall. But I think also like the challenge over there is that since many of us has been used to the fact that salesperson is going through the product, is showing everything. But I think if we are talking about like product-led growth and the people are like starting to use the product by themselves, it's like also super important to figure out how to get customer to see that like wow moment, the moment where you can get the value. And I think that is something that many SaaS companies are like still struggling, like finding the moment, and then at the same time making sure the customer will experience that one. So do you have any tips on that one, like how to figure out what is your wow moment, and then how to make sure that customers will find it by themselves?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, and so that's kind of continuing on the PLG theme, right? Like a big metric for PLG people is time to value. Like how much time, or you can even measure it in clicks, right? Like how many clicks does it take until you actually get some value back? You know, the wow moments, I don't know, for every company it's going to be different, but it's like, oh, this is cool, or yeah, I got some value back, or I see a cool report, or I sent out my first email, or you know, I got whatever value it was. And you know, when you can accelerate that value, you know, eliminate the friction, make your product simple. By the way, number one reason SaaS products get recommended is it's simple and easy to use. You know, you accelerate that value. And then I think there's like, this kind of gets into pricing and packaging. Yes, like maybe like Slack, what we did. So one thing is we were very intentional about was trying to say like, hey, we want to make sure someone gets a lot of value before they are prompted to buy from us. Because I guess I had been, you know, CMO and CRO for a while, and like I had bought a lot of software, and a lot of times like I would just get, you know, hammered to buy it before I'd even experience any value whatsoever. And that was hard, right? So what we tried to do is we said, hey, we're going to have a free plan versus a free trial. You know, most B2B, if they have it, it's a free trial, and it's usually time bound or user bound. And it was a pretty full functioning free plan, which meant that you could go in, you could experience a lot of value. And really the first upgrade driver that you had, I called it a time delayed threshold upgrade driver. And it was when you hit 10,000 messages. And the idea there was that when you hit 10,000 messages, we would let you know and go, hey, if you still want to search on all these messages and you want us to retain all of them, you know, you need to be on one of our paid plans. And if you didn't want to, that's fine. We're just going to hold the most recent 10,000. We'll start deleting the older messages and files. Well, the cool thing about that was they had already experienced like 6 months of value, and then they were prompted, hey, do you want to upgrade? And it worked great. Our conversion rates like blew the water out of kind of industry benchmarks for what you would normally see from a free to a paid plan. And that was kind of an exaggerated sense, but I do think wherever possible, where you can shift the equation to be more value, then are you ready to buy, versus very little value and then like, hey, are you ready to buy? Like you're just not going to get high conversion rates, or you're going to need such a good like sales team that can kind of paint that vision. So anyway, that's how I kind of think with the threshold upgrade drivers.
Yeah. And I think I would love to dig a little bit deeper on the Slack, since Slack is I think one of the most common examples on the product-led growth, and would love to hear more examples there, more learnings there. But one thing I want to ask from the start is the fact that for many SaaS product, you might find value from the product even though you would have like only one user there. But I think on Slack you need like multiple users to really gain the value. We are using Slack in our company as well, but would love to hear your thoughts on that kind of product where you need to have like multiple people on the product before seeing the value. What was that challenging for you guys at the Slack?
It was very challenging from the standpoint that, you know, the average company team size is like 20, you know, whether you're a functional department or whether you're just a startup or a small business. And really what we found out was like, hey, you had to get all 20 people on board. Like if there was just one or two holdouts that are like, I'm not using this, then it kind of breaks down, right? Because then, you know, everybody still needs to use email or use something else. And I think from that, you know, it just means that you have to deliver value as fast as possible. You have to make it as simple as possible. But you also have to, I think there's a missed element in B2B SaaS software, which is you have to provide some delightful moments. You know, you got to make them smile and, you know, make a software that people want to use and have fun using. And so for us, that was little things like, you know, adding emoji reactions, right? You know, I actually think they're very helpful from a business standpoint, right? Like when someone goes, hey, requisition 432 is coming, you know, do I have your approval? When I could just respond with a thumbs up, That's very efficient, and it makes my life better and happier. But people like using emojis in different ways, and that was fun. Or it was funny. Like I remember when we were building it out, we were building all these different integrations, right? And most of them were like business integrations, like Marketo and HubSpot and Salesforce connectors. Our number one integration was Giphy. It was not Salesforce. It was not Marketo. It was Giphy because people were having fun, And I think, that's part of this larger trend, the consumerization of the enterprise, where you take all the best things from consumer grade products and you bring them to the B2B side, which again, in that old metaphor of if only the CIO is buying at the top, in a weird way, and if they're just buying off steak dinners of AEs, it doesn't matter if the product's fun or simple or easy. It's just how good was that steak dinner and how good was that salesperson. But now you have like this revolution where anybody, SaaS, can go in and install the software, and it's got to be simple, easy to use, fun to use. The value's got to come quick. And in this case, you have to have multiple stakeholders be able to come in. You have to have the invite process be really smooth. You can't, especially at high volume, you can't be throwing customer success at every single client. So you have to just keep refactoring it and improving it so that it is just smooth and delightful and really easy to navigate.
Yeah. And I think as we discussed earlier, and we got actually a question from the audience regarding the value that you are adding, and Audrey asked that she was wondering how to go about deciding what is your value metric or the North Star metric inside the product. Yeah. How did you move on that one in Slack, or can you give some examples from there?
Sure, that's an awesome question, Audrey. I like it. So I kind of come from the customer centric camp, which is you really view your brand as the sum of every little interaction, every single experience that someone has with you. And the disappointing thing about SaaS sometimes is most of the metrics are aligned around funnel metrics, form completes, leads, MQLs, SALs, pipeline, ARR closed. And if you only look at those metrics, you can sometimes get guided down a path of just short-term mentality, right? So if you're in marketing and if all you care about is leads, you're gonna gate everything, right? Because you just want to get that form complete, right? And if you're in sales, you're just going to do anything you can to get that first sale. You're not really thinking about the long-term add and upgrade expansion. It's just, I just got to get that sale, right? I got to hit my number. So for us at Slack, what we tried to do is we tried to complement the traditional funnel metrics with some more experience metrics. So the two ones we had that we folded in were, first off, DAUs, or daily active users. So we looked and tracked, and that was one of our three biggest metrics, was just how many people are using the platform every day. And we folded that into a lot of our pricing and packaging. So for the SMBs out there, which are super price sensitive, we actually said hey, if someone stops using the Slack for 10 days, we'll give you credits back. Basically we don't get paid unless you're using it. And that creates a really interesting incentive, right? Because you have to design the software so people actually want to use it. Otherwise you don't get paid. It's kind of like a win-win on both sides. The other North Star metric we had was Net Promoter Score, or NPS. And so I'm a huge advocate of that. And it's a really simple metric. The question is how likely are you to recommend, in this case, Slack to a friend or colleague. But the cool thing is it's so standardized that a lot of companies do it. So it's really easy to benchmark. And it also, I think, is a really good metric of the propensity to recommend and basically the experience that they have. And that experience is guided not just by the product, but it's the marketing experience, the sales experience, right? So one other thing we did to throw in there is we would do, when someone had a sales engagement with us, we would survey them after they finished, and we would go hey, Leslie was your account executive. How helpful was she? 1 through 5. How courteous was she? How knowledgeable was she? How responsive was she? Not just did she close the deal, right? Or did she get you to buy? Because I feel we've all had that. I went to a used car lot and I did buy a car, but I feel I was assaulted during it. It was not a pleasant experience whatsoever. We wanted people to have a pleasant experience so that their Net Promoter Score would rank higher and they would recommend us more. And then, if you're a marketer and you're sales and you have organic word of mouth, which by the way is one of the highest converting lead sources, it's a much more efficient go-to-market model. So those are the metrics we use, but it is an area that I think a lot of companies want to do, but sometimes they just don't have the metrics or the North Stars to kind of guide them in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. What if you would have a chance to go back in time, start all over at Slack? What would you be doing differently, like now when you have gone through everything, learned a lot of things there?
I wouldn't have changed the logo, but that was done after I left. I think Slack turned out great, right? They had a massive exit to Salesforce, one of my other employers as well, and they did great. I think, every year though, there's go-to-market innovation. And just as if you're on the dev side, there's always new, programming languages, there's always new architecture that you can leverage. And just on the same thing on the go-to-market side, it's not static. Like there's always new strategies and tricks, like app store optimization, right? Like that was something that 5 years ago, most companies wouldn't even thought of, or having, even a mobile app that you could optimize for that. And whether it's SEO, product-led growth, virality, like there's just always new ones out there. And I think I personally, for myself, like I've always tried to be open-minded when I come to companies, because they usually come pretty early. And that's what I do now. Like I just advise other SaaS startups, right? And a lot of times I have the luxury of working with them where they have a whiteboard. They haven't like fully built out everything. They're like Series A or Series B, and I can work with them to put in a much more modern go-to-market model. And I think ultimately, like if you just stay open-minded and bring in whatever is the most efficient model, that's going to help you beat your competitors. Because, whenever you have this success, there's a VC is going to fund 10 other startups to try to get you, right? There's just so much capital in the market. And so you have to have a really efficient go-to-market model if you're going to win and capture your category.
Yeah, exactly. Can relate to that one. But then I think one question that many of our listeners are thinking out there is that they are at the moment where they should be like transitioning from sales and lead-oriented model towards product-led growth. What would you say that are like the main steps to take there? Like from sales and like
get
marketing a lead to the like product growth.
It is hard. So I'll say I have worked with a couple companies that, for whatever reason, started off in the enterprise segment. Started with outbound sales, got some success, but now their growth is stalling a little bit, right? Or they want to move down market, they want to get the SMB, or they want more high velocity. It's really difficult. I'll be honest with you. Like, companies that have developed that way, enterprise first, outbound sales first, culturally, I found have a really tough time with a model of, product-led growth, beautifully simple products, time to value, net promoter score, experience, delight. So first off, just recognize like, hey, you have to find who's going to be the champion internally that's going to push this through. It's much of a change management exercise as it is just an X's and O's. You need to do this. And then I think start small. So like, I'll give a good example. Like I think product-led growth, as we said, is the strategy of infusing your sales, marketing, success support into the product. So one of the things, marketing, right? You want to infuse your brand personality into the product. So right now, if you go to most SaaS products, if you go to the website, you're going to see like, bright colors and visuals, and maybe there's a mascot and they're speaking in a fun way. Some, not all, some. And then if you go into the product, it's like everything is like a white background, black text, everything is next, okay, accept, enter. There's no visual identity in the product. There's no editorial tone and voice. There's no delightful moments. I give an example. I use a lot of times the companies I advise, I get equity, and they'll use Carta as their equity management provider. And they have a nice thing. When you get an equity grant, they just do a little firework display. They didn't need to do that. They could have just put in like, you have accepted grants 74325, next. But they made it just a little fun. And at Slack, we tried to do that, like infuse those little fun moments. So that's an area where you could go and just say, hey, there's no like big marketing budget to do that. You can just go and start and go, hey, what are our 2 most used features? Let's just add a little delightful moments in there. Maybe it's like you sent out your first mail campaign, and a big hand gives you a high five and you go like, booyah, whatever it is, just a little delightful moment, right? Or if you're trying to improve simplicity, again, go back, what's your top used feature? Could we just make it a little simpler? Could we make it more frictionless? Could we make it more delightful? A lot of times I found product orgs, and I love working with them, but like it's always like new features. We need to build this new feature and this new feature and this new feature and this new feature. And the problem is, like, if you look at the data, if you look at all the NPS results, you usually see like number one reason SaaS recommended is it's simple. So the more features you add, you're actually making it harder and harder. So like a lot of times at Slack, we would go back and just make really used features simpler and polish them more, make them easier, right? So you could do that. Or the last thing I would say is, if you just want to get started with it, just put in a North Star metric. Just say, hey, you know what? We're going to start tracking Net Promoter Score. And by the way, everybody's bonuses this year are based on it. You'll get a lot of people that all of a sudden go, oh, how do I deliver a better experience, right? Or I remember at Slack with us, we had DAUs. And I remember we said at one point, it was like, if we had 5 million DAUs, everybody in the company got a week off or something. And wow, our DAUs, like, there was a lot of people that were focusing on getting that number up. So those are some ideas for some quick start elements.
Yeah, and I really think most of them actually are like super small things. I think, for example, one thing that many video platforms do, for example, I think Loom, GetAccept, Drift, like every time you start making a video, it might be asking something like, hey, is your hair good or something? Like just like super small things, making people smile. I think that's great ideas there.
GetAccept, fantastic company, love them.
Yeah, and then on the other side, if we think those are the things that where we could be like starting things off, but what do you think? What are the like most common mistakes that company do when starting like figuring out product-led growth?
I think one, maybe they just underestimate it. Again, it depends where if you're an older established company and you've only done sales or outbound sales, like it's a big process. This is a massive change management exercise to just kind of recognize it is, bring in people that have that right DNA, make sure you devote proper engineering resources to it, make sure you have the right metrics to align the teams, and just realize like it's a big change. You're changing a ship, right? You're kind of going in a different direction. It's gonna take in the long haul, it's gonna take some time with it. And ultimately, I think you just have to just take those baby steps, and just get started, get the right metrics, get the right team to move forward, and make sure they're aligned, so that they're successful. And, you do where you can there. It is a different model. But, you got to make sure you've got the right metrics, the right team in place, and that you are focused on the right areas. Maybe one last one I'll talk about, this is a little bit more on the pricing and packaging side, is I see a lot, and this is a controversial topic, but I will say I see a lot of people that are too hesitant on the free trial or freemium. So they'll usually go, let's try this out. Yeah, let's put in a free trial, but let's only make it for like 7 days. And it's basically going to be crippleware, right? Where everything's disabled. They have the very littlest access to it. And like, we're product-led growth. Personally, I think the way you need to think about it is like go to full freemium. And only that, have a pretty full functioning freemium product, but put in like those threshold upgrade drivers. So when they hit 3 months or 6 months, something kind of triggers them to an upgrade. Or another model, which again worked really well for us at Slack too, is the idea is like, you don't do plans based off features. You do plans based off enterprise requirements. So in other words, like enterprises need SSO. Like that should be in your enterprise plan. Enterprises need provisioning and deprovisioning of users. They need compliance exports. They need an SLA of 99.99%. They need a dedicated customer success manager. None of those were emoji reactions in Slack. But if you're an enterprise, like you can't join unless you have those, right? So you need to have those as part of that plan. So like that's, I think, like a really more advanced model is go freemium. have a pretty full functioning product, still go after the SMB segment, high velocity. That's your subsidized marketing. These are tons of people that are going to go out there and recommend you. And then you make your money off the enterprise, who are much more willing to pay a higher price tag. And that's where you make your money.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think then, like, as we've been talking, like, you really need to show the value of your product? And then if we think about like B2B SaaS business, what do you think like happens for salespeople and the role of salespeople? I think, of course, for some kind of products, you might actually not need us anymore. But how do you see like how the change over there happens?
Yeah, I think you absolutely need sales. So one, you absolutely need them. And at Slack, we had a sales team. We had a big sales team. I ran it. I know the people. A lot of people are like, oh, Slack doesn't have sales. We definitely had sales. Because I think, look, the reality is when you sell into the enterprise, you're not selling to one person. You're selling to a line of business. You're selling to the C-suite. You're selling to procurement. You're selling to legal. You're selling to InfoSec. And none of those people want to buy from you, right? Except maybe one person. All the others are like, I'm busy, leave me alone. I got other things to do. So that is hard. Like, from selling all those different stakeholders, it takes a lot of time and energy and process. And it's very, very difficult to do in a fully automated, high velocity way. I think that when you make the transition to product-led growth, what happens is that complex sale becomes easier. So what ends up happening is a lot of times if you have a PLG motion, usually what that means is there's some type of freemium model. There's some types of like small teams within a large organization can start using it. Also, because it's free, a lot of people are using it. So there's a good chance, even if a stakeholder isn't using it themselves, they've heard of it, maybe in a lot of those 5 or 6 stakeholders already know about you. Maybe some of them are actually using it in their little team or in their department. So you've eliminated friction there, right? The second thing that tends to happen is you can find proponents within the company or evangelists that are going to speak on your behalf. So if you're doing your NPS surveys, well, do them down to the user level. So let's say there's 100 people using your product at a megacorp, right? And you're looking at the NPS survey results, and you find this one person that recommended you a 10 out of 10 and said, oh my God, you've transformed our team. I love your product. That's probably a good person to go, hey, would you mind jumping on this call with me with the head of procurement, right? Or would you mind introducing us into a different team? Like they're your advocates, right? So ultimately, like even, like I said, I've run sales, I've done sales. If you're in sales, you should want product-led growth. This isn't like a bad thing. This is going to make your life easier. You're going to close faster. The deal cycles are going to be shorter, and you're going to generally have a higher ASP.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for many companies there is like marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and those are like 2 things that companies are talking about. But I really love the idea of like having product qualified leads, and I think that is like super cool for salespersons.
Look, if you're a salesperson, time is your most valuable asset, right? You don't want to waste time on people that aren't ready, aren't qualified. But when you get people that come in and they've already started using your product, they like it, you can just, it's like fast forward 5 steps, right? They're so much more qualified and it's such an easier sale. So, I get that there's a little worry, and I don't think the intent is to like automate everything. The intent is like, hey, get more qualified leads in faster, and work with it. In fact, I even think like it's Slack, like I think you should give customers the option, right? Like it's like, hey, if you want to talk to a salesperson, that's fine. We still would let little people talk to salespeople. Some people just like talking to someone, and that's fine. And on the flip side, some people are okay with just buying without talking to anyone, right? And now, like I said, in the enterprise, I think that's very rare because it's just too hard. But if you're really customer centric, like give them the option. Don't put your own workflow routing rules on everything, but give them the option. You'll get a higher NPS score that way. And again, you'll just kind of get that flywheel effect of overall word of mouth growth.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds good. Then I think for many listeners, one thing that people love to do, and one thing that I actually as well love to do, is like steal ideas or like look for inspiration, kind of thing. What are your like favorites B2B SaaS companies doing product-led growth to check out?
So I love that too, and I think I'm always looking for inspiration. So where I go for inspiration is B2C. Because I think B2C is basically, it's a SaaS widespread model, right? You just have a ton of consumers that are using products directly and can buy it. And really, like, that's the evolution of where SaaS B2B is going, right? Like anybody can go and download a product. And so I'll give an example. So during this pandemic, I have a little more free time. I think all of us do. We're locked in our caves for 10 hours a day. And I'm like, I'm going to just start, playing some games, right? So I go on and I'm downloading games and, App Store. And there's some complex games out there where, I think I downloaded one. It was like you're fighting like little mini armies and like, medieval times and stuff like that. But here's the thing, like when I started playing the game, you had to learn some stuff, but they were really good where they actually had like a little almost blinking like finger pointer, and it would go, oh, you got to click here next, right? This is the next step, right? And I would do that, and then I get a little gold or something, gamification, reward. Oh, here's the next step. Go over here, and it sounds simple, but hey, I figured it out, right? And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, and I kept playing. And I think, like, God, how many times in a SaaS software have we've gone in and just like, what do I do next? I remember I was working. That's a funny story. I was working with a large company, big company, and I'm a one-person shop, right? And so I'm sending out my invoicing system, and I was directed, and I apologize for being on the call that likes Coupa, but I'm directed to Coupa, which is owned by another mega company, and I'm trying to like submit an invoice. Oh my God! It took me like 3 hours. I've never dealt with a more convoluted system. It was so hard. I'm like, where do I go and what's the next step? And I find out you have to have like training to just figure out how to submit an invoice if you're a vendor. But I was like, in the back of my head, I'm like, they could have used that little finger. I was like, go here. So I don't know. Like, I think in a lot of ways, like, I'm inspired by B2C because I think they do a really good job at making things simple, making things delightful. They generally have brands that are a little more vibrant than B2B brands. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. I like totally agree on that one, because I think many companies still are thinking that you should be selling and you should be doing things differently on the B2B side. But in reality, people are the same that we are as a consumer. So I think great point there. Yeah. But hey, then we could jump on to our last part. I have a question from my previous guest to you, and then you have the chance to ask the question from the next guest. And on my previous episodes, there was Jordan Stupar talking with me about sales. And when he heard that I'm interviewing you next, the question was that when you go to a saturated marketplace, even with like unique product, how do you best position yourself in the marketplace as a key player among other big players? And Jordan, actually, they have a like CRM system, and they were like thinking, for example, there is like HubSpot, there is Salesforce. But what do you think on this?
So I think there's a lot of different ways to differentiate. Right. You can do it through pricing and packaging. You do it through how you go to market and sell. But I would say probably the easiest and least used in the B2B space is to have a strong personality. And what I mean by that is like have a very unique visual identity. So for instance, when I was at Zendesk in our early days, we had a giant Buddha, saying like, love your help desk, and he had a little headset on, and, there were like probably 20 other customer support software companies out there, but, none of them really like kind of evoke that. So I've also done customer support. I did it as like, in my college days, and it was really hard. I don't know if anyone on this watching this has done customer support. You basically have people yelling at you for like 10 hours, right? And it's very stressful, and you got to find the answers, and they're having a bad day, and it transfers onto you. Well, if you see a company that has like this this Buddha Zen that's peaceful, and they find like calm within this chaotic environment. Like that's a really strong visual symbol for you, right? Or even just that slogan, "Love your help desk," right? Like different than most customer support software at the time, or even Slack. Like we would try to infuse that editorial tone of voice and bring it into the product. So when you loaded up Slack, we could have easily had, the Microsoft window hourglass just circling because the app took a while to load. But it was like, no, let's have a fun, inspirational message of the day, or something like that. Or let our users customize what they see, It was just a nice, delightful moment. And so I think like where possible, just choose a strong visual identity, don't be afraid to use strong colors. Don't be afraid to use maybe a mascot. Bring that in. And then as opposed to just having that on your website, put it in your product, right? Because usually too, like in this scenario, you're going against usually larger companies where development is a completely different team than marketing. And they literally sit 1,000 miles apart. When you're a smaller company, these teams are, you still know their names, right? And you can do things like, hey, Joe, you're working on a feature. Hey, what if I come in? Hey, I'm going to work with designer. Let's make a little fun, delightful moment here, right? And let's put it in. Like that's almost impossible to do at like a really larger software company because these teams are just separated. They never work together. And it's why you see really boring software. So I think that's an easy way. And the cool thing there too is that's not like you don't need a 20 million ad budget to go out and run that. That's something like literally anyone listening to the show you can do to help differentiate yourself from someone else in a crowded marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. And really one thing I love here is that for many parts, these parts and like parts earlier on, like many of the tips really are like small ones. They really don't require like super big team, super big budget, but you can really really start on kind of low way. So I really love that one. But hey, then on the next episodes, I'm talking with Chris Gerritsen, and we are actually talking about B2B SaaS sales.
Nice.
So hit me up with some hard questions to Chris.
Yeah, so the one I personally would love to hear is I am always same as you. Like I'm always looking out for new strategies, new tech. I know we were talking about like GetAccept. I love them, but I'd love to hear like what is his like secret SaaS tech tool that he uses for his B2B sales that thinks like it gives him a huge edge. And I feel like there's always new advances happening there. And I'm always curious to hear like, what is a really cool tech tool he uses that, again, gives him a superpower, something that really supercharges his team.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I already wait for the answer on that one because I really think that could help me in my work as well. But hey, thank you so much, Bill, for joining me. Thank you so much for all the listeners checking this episode out. And if you liked it, please share it with your friends and colleagues to learn more about product-led growth. And have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.